Forskningen är den mänskliga verksamhet som hunnit längst i att skapa kontakter och samarbete över gränserna. Förhållanden som i stor utsträckning också godtagits av världens länder oberoende av politiska ideologier eller religioner. Forskarna hade kommit längst i att skapa den öppna värld som den danske nobelpristagaren Niels Bohr beskrev i sitt kända brev till Förenta Nationerna 1950. Även ur den synpunkten ser jag det därför vara av stor betydelse att en stigande andel av industriländernas forskningspotential användes till att i samarbete med utvecklingsländerna bearbeta deras problem med bästa möjliga expertis och teknik. Om Nobelprisen kan bidra till att öka allmänhetens och politikers förståelse för den nyskapande och initiativrike forskarens betydelse för denna utveckling, uppfylles inte bara Alfred Nobels förhoppningar att stimulera den internationella forskningen. Dessa pris kan då också bidra till att skapa den fredligare värld som han drömde om.
Det är att man eljest riskerar att rasera bron på grund av de vibrationer som kan uppkomma på grund av den taktfasta marschen. På samma sätt förhåller det sig med det koherenta ljuset. På grund av att fotonerna svänger i takt och samverkar så får sådant ljus betydligt större inverkan på materia än vad icke-koherent ljus har. Och det ger laserljuset dess alldeles speciella karaktär. Professor Blombergen, Professor Charlow, Professor Siegbaum. You have all contributed significantly to the development of two important spectroscopic methods, laser spectroscopy and electron spectroscopy. These methods have made it possible to study the interior of atoms, molecules, and solids in greater detail than was previously possible. Therefore, your work has had a profound effect upon our present knowledge of the constitution of matter. On behalf of the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences, I wish to extend to you our heartiest congratulations, and I now invite you to receive this year's Nobel Prize in Physics from the hands of His Majesty the King.
Science and Man, a roundtable discussion with the 1981 Nobel laureates in the sciences. Your host in this program is Bengt Feldreich.
Good evening and welcome to the TV studio here in Stockholm. Around this table you'll soon meet the Nobel Prize winners in the sciences, and we'll share their views on scientific achievements and probably put the traditional question, do they believe in scientific intuition? And if so, how would they define it? They're just now gathering here in the studio, and I'd like to introduce them to you.
David Hubel, one of the three laureates in medicine, working at Harvard Medical School, Boston, discovers concerning information processing in the visual system earn him and his fellow prize winner, the Swede Torsten Wiesel, also at Harvard Medical School, half of the prize in medicine. The other half goes to Roger Sperry, United States, for his discoveries concerning the functional specialization of the cerebral hemispheres. Dr. Sperry has asked us to inform about his slow speech during the discussion because of medical reasons. Nicholas Bloembergen is one of the 3 laureates in physics. He is with Harvard University, Cambridge. Laser spectroscopy is the awarded work, and Bloembergen shares half of the prize with Arthur Sharlow, who have made important research in this field at Stanford University, California. The other half goes to the Swedish scientist Kai Siegbarn at Uppsala University, Sweden, for development of electron spectroscopy. Two scientists get the prize in chemistry. Kenike Pukui, Kyoto University, Japan, shares the prize with the Polish-born Roald Hoffman at Cornell University, the United States. The prize citation mentions their theories develop independently concerning the cause of chemical reactions.
Welcome, and we're glad to have you here. We'll pose the first question, and then I understand we'll share your views. Professor Bloembergen, are there different types of intelligence?
I think there are. I remember a meeting in the mid-50s on aerodynamics, and the meeting was opened by Theodore von Karman, very famous aerodynamic engineer. And there were also some Air Force general in the audience. And he said he had taken Webster's dictionary, and he had found that there were 3 types of intelligence. 1, human; 2, animal; 3, military.
Well, there's more sense to that question. I know I have a daughter who is brilliant at languages, but doesn't care for mathematics at all. Mathematics is to her like singing is for me. I can't carry a tune.
There's a story about Albert Einstein, who played the violin, but not very well. And I think Heifetz and Feuermann got together with him once and insisted that he play in a quartet with them. And he was doing rather badly, and finally one of them said, "The trouble with you, Mr. Einstein, is you can't count."
We're talking internationally now, and may I remember or recall a few words by Professor Sune Bergström at the prize ceremony. He mentioned scientists being at the frontier of international relations, and he also talked about the open mind, the active mind of scientists. If you look at the global international scene as scientists, what would you say is the most critical thing facing mankind on the international scene? Because you've been mentioning or widening the perspectives in the discussion. David?
I think if you had to pick one thing, it's the limitation of population. That is, to my mind, the biggest single problem that we have. The biggest adversary, to my mind, of that problem, the biggest thing fighting against the hope of limiting population is organized religion. And maybe the best antidote to organized religion is science, in the broadest and most general terms. But maybe there'll be some people who disagree with that.
Hopefully.
But I think that religion has been a very positive force in our lives, and through much of history. Obviously, men disagree on what religion they follow, and certainly some religious groups, very prominent ones, are opposed to population limitation, but they also can be persuaded, I think, at times, and churches have changed their views. I put no more faith in science than in God.
Professor Bloembergen?
I would agree that the population problem is perhaps the most serious one. I don't think it will be solved by science. I mean, I think we have enough science already to be able to solve the problem. It's a problem of education. And education about all kinds, not just science, but political and social education. See what other cultures do, that one can have happiness without the maximum number of sons. And then one has to wait a generation till people see that you don't need life insurance in the form of survivors in the family. And so it's a very broad question. But the key to all these questions is education, education, and more education for the masses.
The trouble is that we don't have too much time to educate people here. As far as I know, we are about 4 billion people right now on Earth, and within 50 years, 2 generations, we are 8 billion people. And I think one should try to invent some way to educate people in this respect somewhat quicker than we do right now, and I don't know the answer to it.
I was thinking, though, of not science in terms of new discoveries, but in training people to rational thought. The number of people who actually think that astrology and flying saucers should be taken seriously is one example. The fact that the president of our country has said that there can be two opinions about evolution, that one should teach the alternative to evolution, which is some sort of creationism in the schools. It's hard to think of education alone as saving us if rational people, otherwise intelligent people, can hold these opinions.
Well, rational people, unfortunately, can hold very different and,
yes,
and sometimes very evil opinions.
Yes.
I don't believe that our faith is to be found purely in rationality. I don't know where the answer
yes,
to be found.
Yes. To take it away from religion, though, what do we do about astrology? One can surely do better than we're doing.
I don't quite see what education has to do with it. I mean, I ponder the question. In the United States, we educate almost every living body, almost. And yet the belief in the occult, in astrology,
yes.
in those forces has grown. It seems to be a part of the times, and it's not just in the United States. It's somehow an international trend.
Yes, but you don't have an increase in population in the United States. But the increase is in the other countries.
Torsten Wiese.
I was wondering if maybe Dr. Sperry should answer the question in some... I think there is a need in the human, in the way we are built, in our brains, for of occult nature. I mean, of God has been present in all, the need of a God that is present in all culture, and it seems that we should perhaps have a deep respect for that, for however rational we want to be. Still, the mysterious qualities of the mind, still we should sort of perhaps keep sacred in some sense. I think also I mean, we have worried about the population during the 60s. We were very worried about it. 60s, 70s, perhaps less so because of the Green Revolution. And now there is a new emphasis on that. I think still, to me, more worrisome is how to live to create societies which are livable in a sense. I think it's ironical that the scientific fields which have, like social and behavioral sciences, which in dictatorships and even in some democratic states are not very popular sciences, are perhaps those who could become very important for the future. And, I don't know.
As Dr. Sperry, we would like to have your views on this broad and important question.
I doubt that education would help much if you continue to educate in the same pattern. And I doubt that advances in science and technology are going to help much either. They enable us to live in better style for a while, but soon the population catches up and we're caught again in this trap of a vicious cycle of self-feeding, advances in population, advances in technology, and so on. What you've got to do to break the cycle is to change mankind's sense of value, change his priorities, and this means changing his sense of what's sacred, which is at the top of the value hierarchy. So all you have to do is come out with a system that makes it sacrilegious to overpopulate or deplete resources or pollute or destroy or devastate the biosphere, as with nuclear war and so on. Our mind-brain theory supports a position that pretty strongly undermines dualistic solutions, dualistic values and aims, and supports instead a scientific, but a very different scientific system. Science has been characterized and identified with materialism, reductionism, fatalism, mechanization, and so on. And our new theory, which gets into quantum mechanics and its relation to Newtonian and so on, would change the image of science from materialistic to mentalistic, and that needs to be defined. It's not dualistic, and holistic instead of reductionistic. And when you get through, you resolve the conflict between, that Snow has described, the two cultures, the scientific and the humanist cultures, which have been in conflict for decades, are resolved by this change, not by correcting the humanist, but by making corrections in the scientific interpretations, in what science stands for. And it all boils down to an acceptance of the fact that the whole is not only more than the sum of the parts, as Professor Hoffman emphasized at the banquet, but it also obeys different rules and controls the fate of the parts. Once you accept that and apply it to the brain, you come out with a very different image of science and what science stands for. Different worldview perspectives, different interpretation, different views of man and the world. And it's right in harmony with the traditional humanist view. And I'd be interested to hear what Dr. Hoffman would say about the application of quantum theory to Newtonian or classical When he said at the banquet that
You must have been listening.
these wholes do not reduce to the parts. What about the Newtonian mechanics? Does it really, can it really be replaced by quantum theory? I can't imagine quantum theory could ever explain the laws of levers or aerodynamics.
Oh, I think it does. I think there's no question that we can explain.
Statistics or
yes. You feel uncomfortable about these things which underlie things which are probabilistic in nature, but you can explain any macroscopic phenomenon starting from a quantum mechanical theory.
The probability becomes so overwhelming that it's essentially deterministic.
But I guess what I meant about...
I doubt it. I doubt you could explain the function of gears with different shaped or spaced teeth.
It would be terribly awkward.
You couldn't do it. You simply could not do it.
I think that's the point, that it's an understanding gained in a different cross-section of man's intellectual capacity. That is, it is possible to reduce a sequence of firing of neurons to a sequence of molecular and physical actions, and eventually the molecular and physical actions to basic physics in some way. And that is a beautiful way of, you get a beautiful insight into what happens that way. But that's a kind of vertical approach to the problem. Horizontally, what I tried to say in the speech to the students, when you read a poem, there is another sense of appreciation of aesthetics that you get, which does not depend on knowing the sequence of firing of neurons. Perhaps it depends on the following intuitive pathways in our mind and associating words with each other. It's a different way of analyzing man's intellectual activity.
You can't account for the spacing and the timing of the parts of a lever, of gears, of aerodynamics. There's nothing in quantum theory that it takes account of the, quotes, organizational relations of the parts to each other. Quantum theory wouldn't explain this even.
Oh, yes, I think it would, but it would be terribly awkward, you know, when you have billions upon billions of atoms and molecules to use a theory that talks about each individual one.
I know that physicists assume it does, but I question it.
Could we mediate on that, Torsten Wiesel, before we have about 5 minutes left on the program? Or would you have some personal comments on this?
Yeah, I think it's an example of two different languages. I think people are I think Roger has stated, I think Sperry, in a very interesting way, how one can deal with both the materialistic type of looking at the brain, and the mentalistic, and try to harmonize the two. And I think the use of the physical analogy may, to the physicist, not be exactly appropriate, but I think he makes a point, I think very well, that there are things which we can, with lever and gears, that we can understand without having to have the other deeper understanding of the quantum mechanics. And I think it's
more than that.
Right.
I don't think they could. I don't think they could do it.
I think if you take, for example, dealing with a complicated atom, without going into solids or anything big like that, have an atom like uranium that has 92 electrons. There's not enough paper, not enough atoms in the universe to make paper to describe all the positions of all of these at all times. But every kind of a test that we make on this indicates that they do obey the laws of quantum mechanics. And
oh, sure,
but
the quanta
we can't write it all down.
The
but
quanta obey the law, the irradiation.
And we know how we can calculate binding in
and
solid state quite well. And theories are being developed now that account for some things being metals, others being
I don't think
insulated.
there's any problem for the physicists. They can combine that very well. There's nothing wrong with the large-scale mechanical world and quantum mechanics. There's no contradiction.
If we go back to the problem we started with, though, the role of sacredness and religion and things, if one leaves out evolution, one is, I think, deeply in trouble. It's probable that our brain has evolved in such a way that superstitions have been useful at one time in the evolution of man. Now, things have changed, and very suddenly, and superstitions become very dangerous. And so we have to fight, in a way, against the results of our own evolution. And that makes things very difficult.
Well, do you like what's happened in those parts of the world where religion has been ruthlessly suppressed?
No, not at all. I'm not inveighing against religion as such. I'm inveighing against the absence of sort of clear thinking on the fact that if we don't reduce or stabilize the population, we're in very great trouble.
Oh, I don't argue that point.
And the thing that seems to go against that is certain
one more
religions.
point that worries me very much in what Professor Sperry said, and that is to have a hierarchy and make it sacrilegious to do certain things or to omit certain things, because that places a hierarchy of values from the top. I think we ought to keep a very flexible system and learn to think in probabilities and relative values.
His idea that everything reduces to quantum mechanics is what we need to get rid of in order to save the status of science and so on.
And I put the question to our colleagues here in biology, speaking about quantum mechanics, which is one of the basic stones in physics. We found that theory, and it's perfectly valid, without exception, 1925 about. How is it in biology? Have you actually found your basic laws in biology yet? I mean, for example, governing the evolution. Are you sure that you have found them all? Do you know precisely with the basic laws you have how to explain evolution, for example?
1 minute explaining evolution.
We know at least that it can't be explained by quantum mechanics.
No, certainly not, but by something else then.
No, but you disagree with Bloomberg and Hoffman, who think everything can be.
They at least think it has to be compatible with quantum mechanics.
Yes,
That's
yes,
what we all
yes.
agree with.
Oh, that's, no one would disagree with that.
I think as a biologist, I'd like to say that our level of knowledge is not at that of physics, but that's why it's such an exciting field to be in. We have so much to learn and so many discoveries to make. So that's, I think, why many young, brilliant people move into that area.
Thank you, Torsten. I think this was a very fine last remark on this discussion. Thank you, Dr. Sperry, for arguing with Dr. Hoffman. I think you could continue after this discussion, and you will. All the others, thank you very much for being at the studio in Stockholm. And this is goodbye from Stockholm.
This program came to you from the Swedish television, Channel 1.